Chapter 601. Now you know Yunxi's identity. Eric looked down at Lu Yunxi. In front of them, the boy also looked at her blankly. Lu Yunxi stood up and said, I know that I was at fault for this incident and that he was too. But he didn't force me to go out. I was the one who wanted to go out. Furthermore, he was actually very nice to me. He really treated me very well. He also took very good care of me while we were out and did not bully me. I kept bullying him instead. Nonetheless, I think he's a good person. He merely made a mistake this time. All of you have forgiven me for my mistake. So you must give him a chance even though he did something wrong too, okay? Hearing this, Eric could only look down. There was simply no way to rebut her final sentence. She was completely forgiven for her mistakes, not just because she was Eric's daughter, but also because her mistake was not undeserving of forgiveness. Eric patted her head. All right then, I understand your kind intentions. Really, will you really forgive him? Eric looked at Gu Jingze in front of him and nodded silently. Gu Jingze's gaze slowly shifted. All right, I don't necessarily have to pursue this matter. The boy merely looked at Lu Yunxi as if he had something to say. However, he still remained silent in the end. Eric left with Lu Yunxi first. He said, let's go. Although we've forgiven you for causing trouble for the whole day, you said that you would reflect on yourself. Come on, I'll take you home. Lu Yunxi looked at the boy with a reluctant expression. Ultimately, she still turned around to leave abruptly while clenching her teeth. After Eric took Lu Yunxi away, Lin Che came down from her bed. She looked at the boy. What is your name? My name is Shuiyang. He looked at Lin Che before looking at her arm. I'm sorry for causing your injury. I wasn't targeting anyone. At the time, I thought that I could jump first and catch her from below. But I didn't expect Sister Che to fall. Lin Che said, forget it. Since Yunxi has already asked for forgiveness on your behalf, and we have also agreed to forgive you, we will definitely forgive you. Gu Jingze narrowed his eyes and remained silent. Thus, Lin Che grabbed his arm again. Gu Jingze, on account of Yunxi. Gu Jingze still did not budge. Lin Che could only continue to cling to him. Please, Gu Jingze hubby. Sure enough, the word, hubby, was more useful than anything else. Gu Jingze's heart softened and he looked down at Lin Che. Gazing at the state she was in, he was reluctant to give in as he had always been a person who paid wrongdoings back in kind. But at this moment, he suddenly wanted to follow her wishes. Seriously. He looked at Lin Che and gave in. He was really weak against her. Lin Che continued to look at him like an innocent deer. Gu Jingze could only say, fine. This is the last time. Immediately, Lin Che's face bloomed in happiness. Really Gu Jingze, you're so great. Gu Jingze thought, did she immediately stop calling him hubby the moment he agreed? This Lin Che was seriously. Gu Jingze asked, do you always burn the bridge after crossing it? Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze and said disbelievingly, how can you call that burning the bridge after crossing it? When it occurred to her that there were still people around them, she hastily detached herself from his body. She had really used a lot of energy with one arm hugging his tall neck earlier. Gu Jingze did not say anything else. The blissful smile on Lin Che's face right now looked much better than her troubled expression when Lu Yunxi had disappeared earlier. Thus, he gradually calmed down. For a moment, he actually felt that her smile was more important than anything else. He himself could not understand what exactly this feeling was. Why was it so domineering? It had taken over his heart just like that. However, her smile was really like sunshine, bathing his heart in its light immediately. Beside them, Shuiyang had not expected Lin Che to be married already. It was even more surprising to him that her husband was the well-known Gu Jingze. It was no wonder that she rose to fame so quickly, and it was no wonder also that she was so dogged with mishaps. This was probably the advantage and the disadvantage of having a husband like him. Being an ordinary person was probably much simpler than being a person who was always in a prominent position, because it was definitely lonely at the top. But when he saw how the great Gu Jingze spoiled Lin Che, he found it all so strange. The situation seemed to be a little different from what the rumors said. Lin Che turned around to look at Shuiyang. I know that you treated Yunxi very well. I can also tell that you really didn't want to do anything bad. As long as you are willing to cooperate with us to find the real mastermind, we can forget about this incident. Shuiyang said, of course. I said that I would cooperate. But my knowledge is limited too. I've never seen the person, nor have I had a phone conversation. The transaction was purely completed over the internet. Lin Che said, it's all right. We'll try our best. Shuiyang nodded, I definitely will. Also, Lin Che said, you're probably already aware of Yunshi's identity. Shuiyang jolted slightly. He did think that Yunshi was a very nice person. The time they spent together was very short and she was only 12, so he did not really feel anything towards her. Although he did have positive feelings for her, his feelings were not of a romantic nature either. He merely wanted to continue being friends with her. In actual fact, he was only 18. He was not that much older than her either. However, when he thought about it now, was it totally impossible for them to be friends now? Because he had really never imagined that she would actually be Eric's daughter. She was a little princess from the moment she was born. However, he was just the most ordinary person among ordinary people. Even though he wanted to be an actor or a celebrity, he had not gotten a single opportunity. Lin Che said, you can leave first. Quote. He nodded and sighed before turning to leave. That night, Gu Jingze brought Lin Che back home. He carried Lin Che back all the way. At home, Mo Hilling had hidden away in her own room a long time ago. Due to her anger, her vomiting had become much more severe. However, there was nothing she could do about this failed attempt. She had specially gotten a young and handsome man to lure the girl away with the intention to incite trouble on both sides. Although the boy had successfully lured her away, Mo Hilling knew that they would find the girl in no time. But their initial intention was to tell Eric about it so that there would be a fight between both sides. She did not expect that Eric did not blame Lin Che even after he found out about it. Mo Hilling heard that Lin Che had fractured her arm in a fall in order to save Eric's daughter. She could not help but acknowledge Lin Che. Lin Che was too hard on herself. She had used this ruse of self-injury to win Eric's confidence really well. That night, Lin Che fell asleep very early. She fell asleep easily because she could finally relax after feeling anxious for the whole day. However, Gu Jingze still had to spend a long time handling other matters. He read a book while looking at Lin Che, who had fallen into a deep sleep beside him. He touched her ear gently and looked down. He could not help but smile. He seemed to feel happy when he looked at her. He could not believe that he felt this way. Chapter 602. A gift of thanks from Mr. Eric. Although her wrist was fractured, the first thing Lin Che did when she woke up in the morning was still call Yu Minmin. She told her that there was a boy named Shuiyang who was only 18 and seemed to have potential. Yu Minmin asked, are you talking about the boy who took Yunshi away? Yes, Lin Che continued, he's handsome and looks very outgoing. He really looks like a teen idol. I think he's worth nurturing. Anyway, aren't we planning to sign on some new talents to nurture? I think he's quite suitable. Alright then, to be honest, I thought that he must be very handsome and very good looking to be able to lure Eric's daughter away. Tell him to come for an audition when the time comes. Then, I'll leave it to you. Alright, don't worry and just recuperate. Although it's a slight fracture, you must rest for a while, no matter what. Otherwise, there will be side effects. Don't worry. In actual fact, Lin Che had not thought about dealing with anything else either. She was planning to stay at home and rest today. However, in the early afternoon, Eric suddenly released his schedule publicly and said that he was going to visit historical sites in C Nation. This time, he had chosen the Liu family to escort him and made a public appearance with his daughter. All of this was normal and did not trigger much a reaction. However, Eric suddenly said during an on-site interview, our company just collaborated with another company to produce a perfume commercial. X3 hopes to collaborate with Lin Che. I really want her to be our brand ambassador. Everyone was immediately confused. Was he referring to that celebrity Lin Che? Was she going to be the endorsement model for such a major international brand of perfume? No way. These perfume commercials had always featured huge Hollywood stars or European supermodels. When had they ever featured Asian faces? Not even once. However, Lin Che's name had suddenly come up out of nowhere. Everyone hastily asked Eric, why Lin Che? Did Mr. Eric know Lin Che before this? Eric smiled. No, but my daughter is an avid fan of Lin Che's. So I was forced to watch several Lin Che's drama series. Then, I realized that she's really beautiful and that her personality also suits this fragrance of perfume, X3, very well. Like the fragrance, she has an independent kind of beauty. The advertising lines for this fragrance will be very captivating. I think that they suit Lin Che very well. Of course, I still haven't asked Lin Che for her approval. But I sincerely hope that she will agree. Everyone immediately went into an uproar. They felt that Lin Che was really too lucky to actually have Eric's daughter as her fan. Was she about to expand out of Asia and into Hollywood just like that by endorsing this fragrance of perfume? This perfume commercial would probably be broadcast overseas numerous times and not just in the country, right? But Lin Che was still unaware of this news. It was only when Yu Minmin called her in a rush to tell her about this that Lin Che was stunned. Yu Minmin said, "Oh well. You just went on the down low for a few days and now you're going to be in the headlines again." Lin Che said, "What does Mr. Eric mean by this? I merely fractured my arm. I guess you can consider it a profit from misfortune. It's probably because he wants to thank you. Anyway, no matter who wanted to harm you and to create a rift, she has already failed completely." Yes, she has failed completely, because she did not manage to create any rift and had instead made Eric like Lin Che even more. Outside, as expected, Mo Hilling was so angry that she was about to throw her phone. She thought hatefully to herself, this Lin Che was really ridiculous. Could it be that she had been able to capture Gu Jingze's heart so quickly because of her scheming ways? Lin Che was still resting in the room. She could not be bothered to go to her own bedroom either because she knew that Mo Hilling was outside. Just then, the door opened and Gu Jingze came in. She looked at Gu Jingze strangely. "Why are you here?" Gu Jingze said, "It's nothing. I came to accompany you." Did Gu Jingze mean that he was not going to work but was going to stay home to accompany her while she recuperated? Lin Che hastily said, "There's no need. I'll just watch television at home while I rest. You should go ahead and do what you need to do." Gu Jingze looked at her for some time but, nevertheless, lifted the blanket and lay beside her. "I can work from anywhere. Just watch your television." Of course, Lin Che did not dare to continue watching. She was afraid of disturbing him. "I'll get my earphones and use them instead," she said. Gu Jingze said, "It's all right. Just watch whatever you're watching. This small amount of noise won't disturb me." Lin Che fidgeted a little before saying, "Are you sure?" Gu Jingze said, "You won't disturb me as long as you don't move around randomly." Lin Che was about to continue fidgeting but stopped abruptly upon hearing his words. He wound his arms around her body and said gently to her, "You're the only one who can disturb me." Lin Che's face turned completely red. She leaned into his embrace and did not dare to move. Fine then, she would not do anything else and just watch television obediently. In the television series that she was watching, the male and female leads were having a wedding. Because she had been following this series for a long time, Lin Che felt very moved when she finally saw this scene and had an expression of yearning on her face. But she did not know that next to her, Gu Jingze was watching her and had seen all of this. Gu Jingze suddenly put down his tablet computer and looked at Lin Che. Lin Che looked up. "Why?" "It's nothing. Tell me what you want to eat later and I'll tell them to prepare the meal." "Anything. I just want some noodles." "Okay." Gu Jingze went out. He saw Mo Hilling stand up immediately and look at him with a beseeching expression. However, Gu Jingze did not even glance at her and spoke directly to the maids. Mo Hilling had been awkwardly rebuffed. Although it was not the first time, having him do it in front of the maids still made her feel embarrassed. She thought to herself secretly that she had to quickly think of another way to make Gu Jingze and Lin Che separate first. However, the next day, Gu Jingze suddenly came to the bedroom. He looked at Lin Che and asked, "How is your hand?" Lin Che moved it and said, "The painkillers are very useful. It doesn't hurt that much anymore." Gu Jingze said, let's take the chance to go out for a bit while you're on leave for a few days. Huh, to do what? I'll take you somewhere to relax. Oh, are we going out to play? I guess you can say so. What did he mean by that? Still, Lin Che did not question him further. She sat up and saw the maids come in to help her pack. She went to take a look at what she needed to bring. She only brought some daily necessities with her. The two of them got into the car and headed straight for the airport. It was only when they reached the airport that Lin Che asked, where are we going now? To Greece. Huh? Gu Jingze asked, why? Lin Che said, all of a sudden, we're going so far away and you're not telling me what we're doing either. I'm just curious. Didn't I say that we were going to relax? Lin Che pursed her lips. For some reason, she did not think that it was so simple. They only arrived in Greece the next day. They were not anxious upon arrival. Lin Che thought to herself that one advantage of being rich was that there was no need to rush when they were overseas. Gu Jingze took it so slowly. He said that they would rest first before preparing for tomorrow. Lin Che surfed some website about how to travel on a budget. She felt that her strategy was really not suitable for a company president. Chapter 603. Mr. President suddenly arrived at the Western restaurant. Because traveling on a budget was all about rushing for time. Of course, they would not deliberately take it slow and look for someplace to rest before continuing. Putting aside thoughts of budget traveling, Lin Che was still thinking about where to go tomorrow. She had never been to Greece, the country of romance. Many people had always liked the white houses and the blue coastline here. She took a photo and sent it to Yu Minmin. On the other end, Yu Minmin was very envious. She looked at the photo and said, I'm going to die from envy. This is too romantic. Lin Che said, ask older brother to take you out too. Yu Minmin responded in disbelief, do you dare to ask Mr. President? Forget it, he has so many things to deal with every day. I don't dare to ask him. Furthermore, I'm not as lucky as you either. This marriage of mine, we're just living together. What romance? It's good enough if he doesn't find fault with me. Yu Minmin hung up the phone and saw Gu Jingming still looking at something opposite her. Earlier, she had deliberately spoken softly out of fear that he would hear her. At the moment, she did not see much a reaction from Gu Jingming, so she quickly looked down while texting. Just then, she looked down and saw that Feng Xiaoqing was calling her again. She glanced at her phone before rushing out to answer his call. Gu Jingming saw her stand up to take a call and seemed to glance over at her. When Yu Minmin turned around, he was looking down again. Yu Minmin thought that she had seen wrongly earlier. Hello. Minmin, Feng Xiaoqing continued over the phone, are you in the glazed tile palace? Yes. I went to your studio to look for you and they said you weren't there. Ah, is something the matter? Lin Che has a project with our family, so I wanted to send the contract to you and take the opportunity to thank you for your help this time. There's no need. No, I must treat you to a meal. Let's go out and eat. I can also pass the contract to you at the same time. Yu Minmin thought that it was difficult to reject him. The contract was still with him, so she could not refuse to meet him. She could only say, all right then. Where should we meet? After going back, Feng Xiaoqing kept thinking about the fact that Yu Minmin was, as expected, different from the past. He did not know why he was always thinking about her. He felt as if being together with her would raise his self-esteem. Especially when she previously had a crush on him in the past. She must still have feelings for him now. Otherwise, she would not help him out like this. When Yu Minmin arrived, she saw that this place was a very large restaurant. After going in, she saw Feng Xiaoqing at a round desk inside. A restaurant like this did not have any private compartments since it mimicked Western restaurants. Thus, she saw him the moment she went in. He greeted her and said, "Here, Minmin." He welcomed Yu Minmin enthusiastically. Then, he pulled out a chair for her to sit. Yu Minmin looked at her surroundings and said, "This place looks so expensive. You didn't have to go to such a nice place." "No way," Feng Xiaoqing continued, "I must choose a place that suits you. How can I treat you to a meal at a cheap place?" Furthermore, this place is alright. It's not that expensive. Feng Xiaoqing gestured for someone to bring the menu. She randomly chose a set meal and Feng Xiaoqing proceeded to choose a few dishes. At the same time, he also said, "Bring that bottle of red wine I opened and placed here earlier." The red wine that the waiter brought to them looked like it was of a very high grade. Yu Minmin did not expect him to make this such a grand affair. For a moment, she felt even more embarrassed. In actual fact, she had not done anything either. There was no need for him to thank her like this. Feng Xiaoqing looked at her and said, "Good wine to accompany good people. Minmin, to be honest, back then I already felt that you were different from the rest. Sure enough, I didn't misjudge you." Minmin smiled while saying, "Does young Master Feng still remember how I was back then? You were one of the most handsome boys in our school back then. Everyone was just flattering me. I'm just an ordinary person too. How can I forget you? I have always felt that you were a very special person." He gazed at Yu Minmin and made her feel uncomfortable momentarily. He looked at her very affectionately and nearly made Yu Minmin mistake it for something else. However, she thought to herself rationally that this could not be. He knew that she was already married. He probably just felt deeply for her as a fellow schoolmate and was reminiscing past events. Yu Minmin smiled but heard cries of surprise from behind her. Yu Minmin turned around to take a look. There seemed to be some commotion on the other side. Before she could even react, she heard someone say, "Mr. President. It really is Mr. President. Mr. President Gu Jingming." Shocked, Yu Minmin stood up immediately. Feng Xiaoqing had not expected this at all. He looked at Yu Minmin. "This you?" Yu Minmin's expression changed and she said, "Of course not. I came here alone." Was it a coincidence? However, Yu Minmin always felt a little nervous when she saw Gu Jingming outside. Especially because he had always been domineering and unreasonable. When something did not go his way, his face would become tight. She was still wondering whether she had done something wrong and something had happened, so he was here to capture her. However, before she could continue thinking, Gu Jingming's personal bodyguards had arrived to clear the venue. After they entered, Linda looked around and saw that there were not many people here. Then, she gestured for the people behind her to come in. They would only clear out the miscellaneous personnel when clearing the venue. They would not disturb the people who were already eating here. Thereafter, Gu Jingming walked in. Dressed in a black suit, he appeared very calm. He was handsome and had an air of righteousness that easily enchanted everyone. Feng Xiaoqing was very surprised. He had wanted to meet Yu Minmin to tell her that he had feelings for her. But he did not expect Gu Jingming to actually come before he had finished speaking. Mr. President had unexpectedly come. He clasped his hands together immediately and stood up as well. However, Gu Jingming saw Yu Minmin with one look and headed straight towards them thereafter. That powerful aura and the decisiveness and sternness of the head of nation simply swept Feng Xiaoqing away and left nothing. When he walked towards them, everyone only looked at his boundless radiance to the point where they did not even notice Feng Xiaoqing beside him. Gu Jingming said, "You're here." Yu Minmin hastily said, "Yes. I'm here to eat. This is my classmate, Feng Xiaoqing." Feng Xiaoqing jolted slightly at the mention of his name. Gu Jingming tilted his head a little as if sweeping his gaze over Feng Xiaoqing. Feng Xiaoqing was about to speak but Gu Jingming had already turned his head. He looked at Yu Minmin and said, "I'm going upstairs. I have to deal with some matters upstairs." Phew, so he was not here to capture her. But this was way too much a coincidence. She said frantically, "Then, go ahead. I won't disturb you." Gu Jingming nodded and glanced at Feng Xiaoqing apathetically again. Then, he said to Yu Minmin, "I'll see you later." What did he mean by this? Were they going back together later? Gu Jingming left when he was done speaking and did not give her any answers. At the same time, Yu Minmin did not step out of line to ask him about it either. In any case, given his personality, even if someone asked him about it, he would not answer if he could not be bothered to. After Gu Jingming left, the attention on him earlier shifted to Yu Minmin. Yu Minmin was a little dazed as she looked at Feng Xiaoqing. It's really such a coincidence. Let's sit down. Feng Xiaoqing laughed dryly. He looked as if he had yet recovered from his earlier shock. Just then, the waiter brought a bottle of wine to them. Ma'am, this bottle of red wine is a gift from our manager. We hope that you'll try it. They had sent this after discovering that she was Madam President. Being Madam President was really. Chapter 604. They were in the washroom while he was outside. Yu Minmin responded with a word of thanks. Then, she said, but this is too expensive. I'll politely refuse it. It's alright, ma'am, this is just a token of our appreciation. It's not something very expensive. This is a standard gift for anyone who spends at least 1 million in our restaurant. At least 1 million. Exactly what restaurant was this? Yu Minmin was about to speak but sensed that everyone was looking at them. Thus, she could only say, thank you. From time to time, people would look over at them. It made Yu Minmin feel slightly uncomfortable. In her heart, she thought reproachfully to herself, what exactly did this Gu Jingming mean by this? If he did not come, she would have continued to keep a low profile. In ordinary circumstances, other people would not notice her. But now that he had actually come to greet her, he had really caused a lot of trouble for her. Across her, Feng Xiaoqing said, I didn't expect Mr. President to actually come here. Don't you need to go upstairs and take a look? Yu Minmin said, it's alright. He's busy with his work and I'm eating. It's fine as long as we don't mutually disturb each other. Hearing her words, Feng Xiaoqing smiled and said, it must be very irritating to be the Madam President, right? Yu Minmin said, it's alright. I don't have to do anything. Being obedient and listening to him was enough. Feng Xiaoqing said, I understand. Still, it must be very terrifying. But you have always been very independent and resilient. But I wonder how exactly you and Mr. President got to know each other. In the past, I never heard you say that you knew Mr. President. Yu Minmin said, it was just an accident. I guess you can call it a coincidence. Then, you fell in love at first sight. Hee, you can say so. Feng Xiaoqing suddenly narrowed his eyes. Minmin, you can trust me. You don't have to respond to me in the same way you would talk to outsiders. I won't tell anyone. Yu Minmin felt slightly uncomfortable under Feng Xiaoqing's unwavering gaze. She drew in a deep breath and clutched the bag in her hands. Then, she said, I'm going to the washroom first. She stood up and headed for the washroom. Hey. Feng Xiaoqing fiddled with his hands in disappointment. After waiting for some time, Yu Minmin was still not back. He recalled Yu Minmin's expression earlier. He could not help but think that she was definitely not living a blissful married life with Mr. President. Otherwise, she would not have shown such a troubled expression. Perhaps she still liked him, so she wanted to confess but could not do so at the same time. That would explain her earlier expression. Seeing that she was not back, he stood up and thought that he would simply go and look for her. However, just when he had arrived at the corridor, a tall and well-built figure in black stood there for a long time and immediately shocked him into stopping. He looked at that person and mumbled, Mr. President. Gu Jingming narrowed his eyes at him. Feng Xiaoqing stared blankly before regaining his senses and said, She has been in there for a long time. Gu Jingming asked, she's still inside, right? Ha, yes, it was the first time Mr. President was speaking to him so directly. Just like when they had spoken over the phone the last time, his voice was stable and calm. He said, I'll go in and look for her. We won't make young Master Feng worry any further. Alright then. Feng Xiaoqing stopped in his tracks. He continued to wonder if Mr. President was going to the female washroom to look for her. If someone came here. But he immediately understood what was happening when he saw the president's personal bodyguards surrounding the area beside him. Some distance away from him, they were stopping anyone from entering. If Mr. President did not want people to follow him where he went, no one could approach him. Then, why did he, nonetheless, let Feng Xiaofeng come here? Gu Jingming did not spare him a second glance. He pushed the door open and went in directly. Yu Minmin happened to be washing her hands. She could not be bothered to go out even after washing her hands for a very long time. Once she was done, she touched up the makeup on her eyes to prevent it from fading. However, just then, the door opened. Yu Minmin was shocked when Gu Jingming appeared behind her. You. Why was Gu Jingming here? This was the female washroom. Gu Jingming did not say a word but kept walking towards Yu Minmin. He looked down at Yu Minmin and made her feel slightly scared for a moment. The fear spread through her heart faintly. However, Gu Jingming did not say anything but continued to push her by the waist. He stared into her eyes. Unknowingly, his hands had already moved from her waist to beside her, slowly pressing her against the basin counter in the washroom. Yu Minmin sensed that he was leaning in dangerously close. His face was leaning down towards hers and his dark eyes had an enchanting misty-eyed look to them. The corners of lips were slightly turned up as if he was in such a good mood that they were about to lift completely, yet did not want to lift. She sensed that something was amiss. Her arms were already being pressed forcefully to the counter behind her. She looked at him and asked, "What are you doing?" In the next moment, Gu Jingming carried her in his arms and placed her on the counter and asked, "What do you think I'm going to do?" Immediately, Yu Minmin felt uneasy. No way. Someone will come in. This was the restaurant's toilet. It was clear from the luxurious furnishing of the washroom that this place was very expensive. There was no odor at all either and there was even a faintly pleasant scent. The washroom was so clean that there was not a speck of dust in it. Still, this place was ultimately a washroom. Furthermore, it was the female washroom. But Gu Jingming was not concerned about this at all. He simply pushed her against the counter and buried his head in her chest. Her breasts made him feel extremely hot. His face was buried there and he was also putting his lips and teeth to use. After some time, Yu Minmin grabbed his shoulders and cried out, "No, what are you doing?" But her breathing nevertheless became irregular and her body started heating up because of his movements which were at times vigorous and at other times relaxed. "What am I doing? I'm doing you." Of course, Yu Minmin was unwilling. "When we get back. We'll do it when we get back. Can you withstand it until then? I think you can't control yourself anymore, right?" "Oh, no way, Look, you're already giving in to me." His hand also moved downwards slowly. He tugged at the thin fabric, neither removing it nor letting go. He stroked it lightly and seriously made Yu Minmin feel helpless. There was a thin sheen of sweat on her body and her whole body was about to tremble from his teasing. Just then, he smiled and said softly in her ear, "I said it, you won't be able to control yourself at all." What? She was simply playing into his hands. It was true that she could not control herself. Who would be able to control themselves in this situation? But she did not have enough energy left to scold him. She could only hug him and listen as he said gently, "Don't worry. I'll satisfy you right now." Thereafter, he lifted her body up directly and aligned it with his. When the two of them merged completely into one, she cried out in surprise. He said, "Keep shouting. Keep shouting. It will be great if the people outside all hear it." Only then did she remember that this was a public place. She covered her mouth but her voice could still escape. Especially when he suddenly bit her hand and pressed his lips directly against hers. The sounds became even more suggestive. She could not help but whine. At the moment, she was already unable to think about where exactly they were. Furthermore, she was unable to think about who exactly was outside. Chapter 605, she looked extremely satisfied. Meanwhile, these sounds could be heard faintly from outside. However, the two of them stayed inside for a long time and no one else went in. There were even various sounds coming from inside. There was no need to ask to know what exactly was happening inside. Gu Jingming and Yu Minmin. Feng Shaoqing had figured it out, but his body was still trembling involuntarily. When he thought about how Yu Minmin was currently with Mr. President, his expression darkened more and more. After God knows how long, the sounds still did not cease and the two of them still did not come out. Finally, he could not wait any longer and left first. Inside, Yu Minmin shivered when he released. They were finally done. She felt that she was genuinely already half dead from fatigue. She lay sprawled across his body while panting. She only remembered where they were after a long time. She quickly stood up and looked at Gu Jingming. He was in a disheveled state. His clothes were in a mess from her tugging and his buttons were all open, exposing his firm chest which was still drenched with sweat. He walked quietly to her and smoothed out her hair. Yu Minmin was just wondering how he could have come in here. Furthermore, it seemed that he had lasted quite a long time. She really felt that she was going to die from embarrassment. How could it be that no one outside needed to use the washroom? Wouldn't it occur to them when they were not allowed into the washroom? This Gu Jingming, she had already said no. But the frustrating thing was that it was always useless whenever she said it. He simply did not listen to people when he was domineering. Furthermore, he was not forceful at all but merely used his absolute overbearing aura to melt her little by little. She had unknowingly fallen into his trap. Gu Jingming looked at the befuddled expression that still remained on her face. Her lips were completely red and her enticingly large chest was still heaving up and down rigorously. Gu Jingming could not help but feel satisfied. He caressed her face with his large hand as he gazed at her. Yu Minmin could sense his delicate movements. He looked very handsome with his face tilted towards her. The expression on his face after his desire had been satiated made him seem even more sensual in a way that mature men were. His sexiness after releasing his hormones really made it difficult to refuse him. Yu Minmin said, "I'll do it on my own." However, Gu Jingming did not allow it. He looked at her and said, "Don't move." He held her hands and slowly wiped away the sweat on the side of her face. He pulled her clothes up. When he saw the numerous marks that he had left behind, he involuntarily felt even more at ease. He cheerfully carried her down from the countertop and said, "All right. I'm leaving. I'll leave you to tidy yourself up." Yu Minmin said, "You're serious at this place, how could you?" Gu Jingming turned around. "Weren't you the one who couldn't wait?" How was she the one who couldn't wait? Weren't you the one squeezing so hard that I wanted to die? Immediately, Yu Minmin felt her face redden even more. She hurriedly tidied her clothes and ran out directly. After leaving, Yu Minmin could see Gu Jingming's personal bodyguards standing there from afar. Because his bodyguards were here, no one came over since they knew that Mr. President was here. However, even though no one had discovered her encounter with Gu Jingming earlier, Yu Minmin nevertheless felt so embarrassed that she was about to burrow into the ground. Although the way they had been in the throes of passion just now really made her feel bashful yet very comfortable. That feeling made her feel as if she was about to fly into the sky but nosedived rapidly. She felt like she was on a roller coaster constantly challenging her limits. Who was the one who had said that Mr. President could not do it? He totally could and was even full of tricks. It made her feel so alive at times and like she was dying at others. Yu Minmin regained her bearings and returned to her seat. She looked at Feng Xiaoqing and cursed internally at Gu Jingming. He had been too absurd. Just like that, he had trapped her in the washroom, and made her stay in there for such a long time. Now, she totally did not know how to explain what had happened. She said, young Master Feng, I was just." Feng Xiaoqing looked at her. He smiled and said, "Oh, I was wondering if you had gone out to do something." "Oh yes, I went out to do something earlier. Sorry." "No problem." Feng Xiaoqing smiled uncomfortably. He felt even more uncomfortable when he saw her appearance right now. The parts of her body that should be covered were all covered up and there was no sign that anything inappropriate had happened earlier. However, the look of contentment on her face seemed to make her give off a faint womanly scent. He said, "Continue eating. I'm just worried that you're not full yet." "No, I've already eaten enough." Although she really had not eaten much, she did not feel hungry at all right now. She merely felt tired and she was slightly weak in the legs. However, things did not end there. Just then, Gu Jingming, whom they thought had already left, suddenly came here again. He walked towards them from afar with his personal bodyguards continuing to follow him. He glanced at Feng Xiaoqing coolly, but there was more enthusiasm in his gaze than there were at any other time before this. It was obvious that he seemed to be in a good mood. "Young Master Feng, how is the meal going?" Feng Xiaoqing stood up quickly and looked at Gu Jingming. His strong presence was not at all affected by what had happened earlier. Furthermore, it had instead become even stronger. Feng Xiaoqing said, "We're almost done eating, Mr. President." Thus, Gu Jingming said, In that case, Minmin, we can go back home together for convenience's sake. I'll take you with me. Yu Minmin looked at Feng Xiaoqing before looking around at the people still staring at them curiously. She could only hastily nod and say to Feng Xiaoqing, "Thank you for today." Feng Xiaoqing quickly handed the contract to her as well. "This is the contract. Don't forget our official business." "Oh, right, sorry for the trouble. You even came here personally to give it to me." "It's nothing. It's something I should do. Then, goodbye." Goodbye." Yu Minmin smiled at him and caught up with Gu Jingming. With a row of personal bodyguards escorting them, the president left the restaurant with them. Feng Xiaoqing looked outside and saw Yu Minmin leaving with the president's team of bodyguards. Their massive formation made them look majestic. Inside, Feng Xiaoqing felt slightly unconfident for a moment. Before this, he had thought that Yu Minmin must still have feelings for him. But when he looked at Gu Jingming now, what woman would still be thinking of another man when she was beside such a powerful man? Especially when the two of them had been in the washroom earlier. In Greece, Lin Che had not decided where to go, but Gu Jingze had already gotten everything prepared. He got into the car with Lin Che and they continued to drive somewhere else. When they arrived, Lin Che alighted and saw that they had come to a romantic place. The coastline was so clear that it looked like a painting. The white houses looked like they had come out of a fairy tale. Only then did Lin Che ask in pleasant surprise, "This is Santorini, right?" Gu Jingze smiled. "You've improved. You even know the name of this place." Lin Che said, "Of course. I read up on budget traveling options the whole night." Gu Jingze continued, "Budget traveling?" "Yes, didn't you see? There are so many articles on budget traveling here." "How do we do that?" Chapter 606. He had unexpectedly brought her here for this. It's basically having no one to help you make preparations. You'll book a cheap hotel wherever you end up and look at the options to choose something cheap to eat. Anyway, it's just going around without much fanfare. It doesn't suit a company president like you. Gu Jingze pondered for a bit before saying, "Of course. That would be a total waste of time." "Fine. But it would be good to give it a try once in a while." "Really, do you want to try?" If there's a chance." He hugged Lin Che. "I can try it together with you." He was not very interested in it, but there was no harm accompanying her around. Hearing this, Lin Che broke into a smile. She headed down the stairs first and looked at the enchanting scenery around her. Then, she smiled and said, "This place is so beautiful. It's like we're living in a fairy tale world. It doesn't look that big though. It looks so big in pictures, but it looks smaller here." Gu Jingze said, "Of course, you can't completely believe what you see in the pictures." He pulled Lin Che down the slope. Lin Che kept looking around and felt that it was indeed inadequate to just stay at home and look at pictures of many places. She still had to come out and walk around to know exactly what these places were like. If not for Gu Jingze, she really did not know when she would have the fortune to come here. Furthermore, it was such an extravagant experience too. It was a trip that did not require her to think about anything and they left when they wanted to. While Lin Che was still thinking about this and that, Gu Jingze had already brought her all the way to a small villa. She called it a small villa because it was really much smaller than the Gu residence. After going in, Lin Che looked down at her surroundings. She thought that they were going to stay here, but when she looked up, she realized that there were many people currently looking at them from inside. Everyone bowed respectfully when the two of them entered. From the looks of it, it seemed that they had waited for them for a long time. When she walked into the room, the first thing she saw was the many wedding dresses on the clothes rack across her. Lin Che was completely frozen. She looked at the dresses and said, "Wow. What is this?" Gu Jingze turned his head and looked at Lin Che, who was covering her mouth with her hands. "Although we can't hold a wedding at the moment, we can take our wedding photographs first." Wedding photographs? Lin Che had never even worn a wedding dress. Even when acting, she had never filmed such a scene. A wedding dress. So did he bring her here to take wedding photographs? Lin Che turned her head and gazed at Gu Jingze. Gu Jingze said, "Come. Let's go and try the wedding dresses on." Lin Che nodded and followed him in. The photographer was a man with a glib tongue. He was slightly sissy but still looked very adorable. Upon seeing Lin Che, he immediately said, "Iya. You're too beautiful, Mrs. Gu, it's truly an honor to be able to take photographs of the two of you." Lin Che froze. She looked at him and thought he looked familiar. "Hey, aren't you that photographer who got an award last year?" "That's right, so you know who I am, ma'am." Of course, she knew him. He was the person who had gotten an award at the international photography competition. A professional photographer who was hired to take photographs for Victoria's Secret. Was the photographer for Victoria's Secret going to take her wedding photographs? Lin Che went over to choose a dress. There were wedding dresses of different styles. Some were fitting, some were puffy, some were vintage, some were pretty, and some were coquettish. Lin Che randomly chose a dress to try on first. When she came out in a puffy dress, the handmade butterfly bows cinched around her waist were of different sizes, causing the layers and layers of fabric below to pile up thickly. Gu Jingze was sitting at the side and resting when he heard someone cheering. Then, he looked up. Only to see Lin Che standing inside fully dressed in white. She was as beautiful as an angel in the snow. Everyone immediately fixed their eyes on Lin Che. They simply felt that she was too beautiful. How could there be a woman so suited to wear a wedding dress? How could there be a woman who looked so good in white? "Madam, you're so beautiful. I think this dress looks quite good." "Yes, Madam hasn't even put on makeup. She will definitely look even more beautiful once she puts on makeup later." Just then, Gu Jingze stood up as well. He gazed at Lin Che unwaveringly before suggesting, "Why don't you try on the other dresses?" Lin Che thought that this dress looked quite nice, but she did not want to decide after trying on just one either. In any case, since they had prepared so many dresses, she had to try a few more so that their efforts would not go to waste. Thus, she chose another vintage wedding dress that was cinched at the waist. After she went in and came out again, everyone cheered once again. This time, she had chosen a fitting dress. It was made of the heavier type of cotton material and was lined with decorative details. It covered some parts of her body, making her look sexy but not at all cheap. Instead, it made her look very elegant. "Wow, you're so beautiful, you really look like a princess." Everyone started cheering again. They knew that Lin Che was a celebrity and that she definitely looked better than ordinary people. She would look better in whatever clothes she tried on too. However, they had not expected her to look this good. Seeing how everyone gasped in admiration at Lin Che's appearance, Gu Jingze was in an extremely good mood at that moment. He squinted his eyes and looked at Lin Che, thinking to himself that they were right. She was very beautiful. He walked towards her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He looked down at her and smiled. "I also think that all the dresses look good. Why don't we take photos of both dresses?" Beside them, the photographer added, "Fantastic. Your figure is really great. The shape of your face and your neck are all so beautiful. You would definitely look very pretty under the lens. I'm very honored to be able to photograph a person as beautiful as you. You're truly as beautiful as the scenery." Lin Che pursed her lips and smiled. Her cheeks were warm. "I really don't deserve such praise." "No way. You absolutely deserve it. You didn't see how stunning you looked when you came out. You'll realize it when you see the photographs later." Gu Jingze said, "Her arm is still injured. Don't make her move dangerously." "Oh, of course. Don't worry. We'll just take photographs of her in her most typical state. We want something very natural because Madam is most beautiful when she's smiling naturally." The concept designer and the makeup artist then walked towards them and put makeup on Lin Che. It had always been easy to put makeup on Lin Che as her skin was in a very good condition and was very healthy too. Staying in the Gu residence for so long and eating balanced meals prepared by the chefs at the Gu residence made her skin even better. Gu Jingze sat there and watched Lin Che dress up. He thought to himself that back then, he could already see the shape of this piece of unpolished jade. Now that it had transformed and become so much more beautiful, it really made him marvel at it. Although he had known from the beginning that she was very beautiful, he had not paid attention to her appearance again for a long time. This was because he had already gotten used to her. He felt that she looked fine regardless of how she looked. Now that he was really looking at her in detail, he felt that they were right, she had become more beautiful. Her facial features seemed to have grown into themselves. Her skin was also moister. It was as if water would come out if he pinched her face. It was as fine and smooth as a baby's skin. He felt even happier. He seemed to feel extremely satisfied, especially when he saw how everyone looked at Lin Che so adoringly. When her makeup was done, Gu Jingze had already changed his clothes as well. The gray suit Gu Jingze was wearing was meant to match with the white wedding dress and made him appear to have a much more sunny disposition. He no longer looked so cold as well. Lin Che's eyes lit up when she saw him. Chapter 607. She was wearing the romantic wedding dress. Gu Jingze had always made her feel that he was not a prince but a knight. He brought darkness with him and terror while protecting her, but there was always a faint gloomy air about him. However, Gu Jingze seemed more like a prince today. He was obviously as cold as usual but his gaze was much warmer. Lin Che looked at him while walking towards him step by step. She was suddenly beginning to look forward to a wedding. Perhaps the meaning of marriage did not lie in letting everyone know who she was married to, but simply in wanting to see him receive her warmly as if declaring to God that he was going to bring her to a new world. The only thing on her mind was that she really wanted people to see him right now. He was so warm, so handsome, and so tender-hearted. She did not know why everyone was so afraid of him. Lin Che thought that Gu Jingze was actually not that scary, but no one could see this good side of him. She walked towards him while the photographer said excitedly behind her, "You two look good. You look great together." Then Mr. Gu, "Madam, can we go out and start taking photographs?" Gu Jingze nodded and led Lin Che out. They drove all the way to the seaside. The moment they alighted, they could see a boat anchored on the blue coastline. Gu Jingze said, "I just bought a boat. Let's go up and take some photographs." Lin Che let out a sound of affirmation. He then pulled her onto the boat. They could see the blue sea from the boat. In front of them was a beautiful fairy tale castle. It looked extremely beautiful. Lin Che could still see many people taking photographs below. They looked at the huge boat on this side and looked at the two people on it in wonder. Lin Che said, "So many people come here to take wedding photographs." Gu Jingze hummed in affirmation. "We got on the boat to take photographs so that people would not disturb us." While the sea breeze was blowing, the photographer adjusted his camera and he looked at the two of them. One was Gu Jingze and one was Madame Gu. After considering it for a long time, he still did not dare to use the methods he usually used on models. Thus, he could only say to the two of them, I think the two of you can just pose randomly and we'll take some photographs first." Lin Che said, Mr. Photographer, please just tell us what to do, otherwise I've never taken wedding photographs before. I don't know what I should do." However, the photographer looked at Gu Jingze standing tall over there and still did not dare to instruct him. It was fine for him to command models. It was also fine for him to shout and scream at them because he was a famous photographer and all the models had to try hard to please him. But telling him to shout and scream at the great Gu Jingze? Forget it. Of course, he did not have the guts. Lin Che stood there and looked at him for a long time. However, Gu Jingze suddenly pulled Lin Che to him swiftly and said to her, "Turn around and look at me." Lin Che let out a sound of surprise and suddenly felt Gu Jingze's face come close. That dashing and handsome face had a gentle aura to it. He moved towards her and grabbed her by the shoulders as if taking in her scent. Lin Che's eyes widened considerably. She was a little surprised. Her blank expression looked very adorable. The photographer saw the highlight immediately. Having been a professional photographer for such a long time, he was able to grasp such beauty very easily. Thus, the photographer aimed his lens at the two of them and began taking shots. After kissing her, Gu Jingze brushed his lips lightly over her face while caressing her cheeks with his large hand. Then, he pulled her towards him. Thereafter, his sensual and unyielding eyes met hers. Gu Jingze's entire body gave off an enticing atmosphere. With his back facing the sun, the warm light shone down on his body and perfectly emphasized his extraordinary figure. He looked as dignified as royalty. Even the photographer was stunned. Not missing a single opportunity, he began to take photographs again. Then, he caressed her body gently. The veil on her head floated all the way out of the boat and towards the azure blue sea. Gu Jingze looked at her lovingly. With his arm wrapped around her waist, he smiled and said to her, behave like you normally do. Pretend that there's no one around. Do what you do when we're together normally. Relax. Normally they would be this intimate. However, of course, that was only when they were alone. How could she do that now? She looked down in embarrassment and did not dare to look at him. However, he continued to stroke her face and gently kissed her hair, her nose, and her lips. The staff around them nearly went into a daze staring at them. Only because this picture was truly too beautiful. A handsome man and a beautiful woman. They were both as beautiful as deities. Right now, they had even specially dressed up on this rare occasion. Between the blue sea and the azure sky, they truly looked like part of a painting however they stood. There was no need for them to deliberately strike other poses. Furthermore, Gu Jingze treated Lin Che so gently and tenderly. The two of them looked impossibly intimate and Gu Jingze was really very gentle. Everyone thought enviously, if only Gu Jingze could treat them gently for just a moment it would be worth it even if they died. They could not imagine it. Could it be that Gu Jingze was so gentle towards Lin Che on a daily basis? In that case, Lin Che was really lucky. Just by looking at Gu Jingze, they did not expect that he would have such a side to him. However, they knew from looking at how natural his movements were that it was definitely not the first time they were being so intimate. The people down below seemed to see this scene. Although they were also taking photographs on their boats, most of their boats were small, rented boats. The boats were very small so of course, their photographs did not look that stunning. In particular, the two models on the boat made many people gasp in admiration and yearn for something like that. One person could not help but say to his own photography team, why do they have such a huge boat but we don't? Precisely. We spent a lot of money to go overseas to take our wedding photographs too. Why did you give us such a small boat? Their photography team could only tell them, that boat was custom made. Our company doesn't have that boat. The people whose photographs were being taken said unhappily, do we have to give you more money? Let us know if that's the case. We've already come this far. We don't mind having to pay more money. The photography team said in disbelief, that's really not the case. We really can't get another boat. We heard that that boat belongs to them and they brought it out here to take photographs. We can't borrow it even if we want to. Ah, it's their own boat. Everyone looked up at them. All they saw was that beautiful picture. It looked unreal. They looked at them enviously for some time before deciding that there was nothing they could do. The photographer took some photographs before looking at them. Every single photograph needed no editing. They could totally just print it out and use it. Ultimately, it was because the foundations were already laid. Thus, no matter how they took the photographs, the two of them had beautiful figures, and great presence. There was no way the photos would not turn out well. He felt that these wedding photographs were truly the best ones he had ever seen. Chapter 608. Budget traveling while taking photographs and walking. They took a set of photographs while they were here. Lin Che went down to ask the photographer. How are the photos? Did we do all right? She felt that they had not really moved much. Her mind had been blank throughout the whole process. It was because Gu Jingze kept coming too close to her for no reason, causing her to be unable to breathe momentarily. She could not think either. She did not know what she was doing. The photographer gave her 2 thumbs up. You were really great. I think the two of you should just walk on your own and not deliberately strike poses. On the contrary, the photographs would look very good. Lin Che said, really? That's great. I don't know how to strike poses at all either. The photographer smiled and said, Madam, in the first place, you're a famous celebrity whom everyone knows. How can you not know how to take photographs? You've probably been in quite a few big productions, right? Lin Che smiled and said, not at all. I'm fine with filming, but when it comes to taking photographs, it's really difficult for me. I don't know how to pose at all. Madam, you're truly too modest. I've seen the photographs you took for Microforce. They looked really good. That was actually my first time taking photographs. The fact that you could take such good photos even though it was your first time means that you're really photogenic. You look good through the lens and your figure and appearance are very suited for the camera. That's why your photos turned out well. Alright then. There was no way Lin Che would understand these things. She said, in that case, I will go budget traveling with Gu Jingze tomorrow. You'll come along with us so that we can take photos while walking, right? The photographer said, that's a very good idea. Wedding photographs like these will be very meaningful too. From the side, Gu Jingze looked at Lin Che gloomily. Only then did everyone realize that Gu Jingze had not agreed. But Lin Che had mentioned it before asking for his opinion. Everyone looked at Gu Jingze with a slight worry. Only then did it occur to Lin Che. She looked up at Gu Jingze and said, hee. You said that we were going to try budget traveling, right? He merely said that they could try it. He definitely did not say that they were going to start now. Lin Che smiled at him in an attempt to appease him. However, seeing that Lin Che had already decided, Gu Jingze nodded in agreement as well. Then, he said, just 2 days. Alright, we'll do it for just 2 days. Furthermore, your arm needs rest. We can't stay out for too long. Alright, it's just a slight fracture. It won't hurt as long as I don't move it. You must rest, Gu Jingze insisted. Everyone looked at Gu Jingze's tight expression. All of them were so afraid that they did not dare to make a sound. Lin Che was the only one still protesting, why must you be so fierce? Fierce? You still haven't seen me in a fiercer state than this, Gu Jingze said. Lin Che pulled on his arm and said, alright. I'm not stupid either. I will definitely ask for a break when it hurts. Everyone looked on in surprise at the sight as Lin Che acted coy to Gu Jingze. To their surprise, Gu Jingze did not even get angry. He stared at Lin Che before saying, alright. At this, Lin Che laughed loudly and said to the photographer, then, let's prepare for it and set off tomorrow. The photographer also smiled and said, alright. I really look forward to this trip. The photographer thought to himself, traveling together with Gu Jingze budget traveling, even. The mere thought of it was wonderful. That night, Lin Che looked through the budget traveling manual and took down notes for a long time. Finally, she lay there and fell asleep immediately due to fatigue. After waking up in the morning, Lin Che finished packing very early. She looked at the money in her wallet and said, I looked it up. Since we're going budget traveling, 10,000 RMB per person is enough. 10,000 RMB. Gu Jingze frowned. Lin Che said, can we even call it budget traveling if we bring more than that? Gu Jingze could only say, alright then. Lin Che said, I booked a guest house yesterday. It's on this side of the island. A guest house. It means staying in someone else's house. Each person gets a small room. I booked one for us and one for the photographer. After packing up, she and Gu Jingze set off together. They did not instruct anyone to follow them. Even if they would see other fellow countrymen, they would not be as conspicuous since they were overseas. They would probably not be surrounded even if Lin Che was on the streets. On the other hand, very few people in the country knew what Gu Jingze actually looked like. Even if they saw him, they would probably just think that they had seen a very handsome man. They would not think anything else. The photographer followed behind them. Back then, he had once been poor and had gone on a trip like this too. It was only after he became famous that he very rarely went out like this again. If not for the fact that he was going with Gu Jingze and Lin Che, a big-name photographer like him would definitely not come to join in the fun. But as he watched Lin Che and Gu Jingze walk forward so calmly, he subconsciously felt that budget traveling by wealthy people was different from budget traveling by poor people after all. Although in both cases they were on a budget, the feeling was just different. In particular, when he saw that even Gu Jingze was on a budget trip, he felt that he was literally experiencing life. With this in mind, he was even more proud of himself. As the three of them continued walking, the atmosphere was very pleasant at the moment. Lin Che was dressed in a white dress to create a contrast with the scenery. The dress was light as a feather and matched the scenery well. Gu Jingze was also wearing a white t-shirt. The two of them walked side by side. With the blue sea and the azure sky behind them, it really made them feel carefree and relaxed. She felt that the sky here was penetratingly blue. If she took a picture of it, it would already be a postcard without needing any editing at all. Lin Che said, "Wow. No wonder so many people feel that this place is very romantic and spotlessly clean. Seriously, this place doesn't feel like those big and bustling cities in America at all. It's just very romantic." Gu Jingze replied, "After all, America was founded later, so it has more cities. Only the southern cities will have many rustic counties. The big cities like Seattle and New York are completely made up of concrete. Of course, they are different from the older European countries. The culture is different." Lin Che said, "Oh, I see." After listening to his explanation, she looked up at Gu Jingze's calm side profile. The photographer immediately began to snap photos. As he watched that scene, he felt that the two of them would look great together even if they were just having a normal conversation. They simply looked very well suited for each other, especially with Lin Che's admiring gaze and Gu Jingze's calm expression earlier. It was no wonder that the two of them seemed so harmonious once they stood together. It was mainly because their personalities were so complementary. The photographer genuinely felt envious when he looked through the photos in his camera. He was literally here over these 2 days to be reminded of his bachelorhood. They walked and walked until they arrived at the city center. There were small shops on both sides and the tourists were selecting souvenirs inside. Lin Che pulled Gu Jingze along with one hand. Her eyes were completely fixed on those little trinkets and she started looking at them one by one. The two of them walked along the street while the photographer followed from behind and took photographs. When he looked through the photos that he had taken later, there were photos of the two of them walking on the streets holding hands, photos of him helping her wipe off the crumbs on the corners of her lips, photos of him looking at her dotingly as she ate some ice cream, and photos of them on the streets with their heads touching while they looked at something. He felt that every single photo looked great and he could not bear to delete any of them. It was actually the photographer's first time trying out this method of following someone with a camera. For a moment, he thought that he could do this again in the future. The effect of such a method was really different from when he took photos while people posed. Love really exuded from the photos and he could feel the warmth just by looking at them. Chapter 609. A romantic date just for the two of them. Lin Che followed the directions shown on the map on her phone and found a place for them to eat. After going in, Gu Jingze had no problems communicating. He spoke in French and English and they immediately served up some delicious dishes. The people beside them had initially been gesturing to order food. When they heard Gu Jingze's order after blabbering on and on, their jaws dropped in surprise. After sitting down, the three of them randomly ate the food. Lin Che asked, "Do the people here speak English or what?" Their official language is Greek. But most of the stall owners here know how to speak English, French, and German. They also know a bit of Italian. After all, this area is quite small and they often make their rounds here, so they know many languages. Then, earlier, you were speaking. I was trying out all the languages to see which one the stall owner knows. Lin Che gazed at him in surprise. Beside them, the photographer joined in and said admiringly, "Mr. Gu, you truly are a fine example of excellence. People like me are so ashamed of ourselves. Despite being in Paris for so many years, I don't even know how to speak French. I'm so ashamed, so ashamed." Lin Che said, "People like him belong more to the abnormal spectrum. We are the normal ones. It's all right, you don't have to feel ashamed." The photographer merely smiled. The madam had already spoken. He, however, did not dare to call Gu Jingze abnormal. It is evident that Mr. Gu's current accomplishments were already anticipated. After all, you worked very hard. Your diligence and eagerness to learn is truly very admirable. Lin Che thought to herself that what he said was indeed true. Outsiders did not know how busy he was, but Lin Che knew this clearly. It was obvious from the fact that he had to be ready at all times for calls and use his handphone and tablet to deal with business matters while they were here to take photographs. It seemed that throughout the entire year he did not have real off days. In comparison, employees still had a few days of leave during which they did not have to think about anything. However, as a boss, he was busy during all 4 seasons of the year and could not even have one off day. After they were done eating, they headed to the guest house that Lin Che had booked. The house was just beside the restaurant. When they went in, the three of them heard another couple beside them. They were probably here for their honeymoon and were extremely happy. When they came in, they shouted in surprise, "This place is really not bad." The man said very proudly, "Of course. I booked this place online. This guest house is very big, right? The living room is so big, the kitchen is so big, the only drawback is that there are more people. But it's still much better than a hotel, and the hotels are so expensive too." Yes. The girl was very happy and did not seem to notice that more people had entered behind her. She continued cheering and shouting. The guest house belonged to a local. The kitchen and living room were for shared use by the guests, but each room was for private use. The three of them checked into the guest house with the owner. Lin Che and Gu Jingze were in the room on the left, the photographer's own room was on the right. After going into the room, they saw that it was quite big. Lin Che lay on the bed and immediately felt that running around the whole morning had really tired her out. From here, she could still hear some noise from outside. It seemed that the soundproofing was not particularly good. It seemed that they would encounter their fellow countrymen no matter where they went, since the population of C Nation was huge. Thus, Lin Che could also understand the conversation happening outside. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze and said, "Don't you think this place is too noisy?" Gu Jingze said, "It's a little noisy." "Ah then, do you want to go back?" "Forget it, we can make even more noise at night." Gu Jingze lay down and ran his fingers through her hair. "Hey, what are you doing?" Lin Che whined. Gu Jingze smiled. He could not get enough of her bashful expression. However, it had really been a long time since he last teased her, as her arm was injured. When dinner time came, the landlord called the phone in the room and said that he would treat them to dinner outside. Lin Che and Gu Jingze left the room together. They were typically not too clingy towards one another, so when they saw the other couple holding hands and kissing in front of them, Lin Che really could not get used to their public display of affection. Could they please not kiss while walking? It was preferable for them to look where they were going. Precisely because of this, the two of them walked forward and nearly crashed into Lin Che. Fortunately, Gu Jingze waved his arm and let out a sound of disapproval at the same time. Only then did the couple immediately notice the two of them. When she saw Gu Jingze, the girl was instantly stunned. But when she then saw Lin Che, she asked, "Hey, you. You look very familiar. Ah, are you Lin Che?" Lin Che pursed her lips and said, "Everyone says that I look like her, but I'm not her." When Lin Che finished speaking, she pulled Gu Jingze's arm and walked out with him. Hearing this, the girl let out a sound of affirmation and said, "That makes sense. I don't think Lin Che has a boyfriend. She just has many rumored partners. Furthermore, why would Lin Che stay here? This place is so cheap. A huge celebrity like her would definitely stay in a reputable hotel." "Hey, don't leave. You're from C Nation too, right? What's your name?" Because Lin Che looked a little different in real life than she did on television, the girl did not easily determine that she was Lin Che. Lin Che turned around and said, My name is Shen Yoren." She said this as it was the only name she could think of at the moment. "Ah, that's wonderful. I heard early on that many people from C Nation go overseas to travel. Sure enough, I met some. Are you here for your honeymoon vacation?" "No, we just came here to enjoy ourselves a bit," Lin Che said. The girl let out another sound of affirmation. She looked at Gu Jingze beside her and momentarily found him very handsome. However, he seemed like he could not be bothered to interact with people. "Is this your boyfriend?" she said a little shyly. Lin Che said, "Yes. His name is Chen Yuchang." Gu Jingze looked at her with his eyes narrowed slightly. Lin Che chuckled. She saw on the opposite side that the photographer was already here and rushed to greet him. "How's the room?" It's great. It's more than enough for me to stay in. Let's go and eat. Would the two of you like to go out after eating to take photographs of the night scenery?" Sure. While they were eating, the couple across them watched the three of them eat at a separate table, chattering happily away. The girl stared at Lin Che, thinking that she looked more and more like Lin Che the more she looked at her. However, the man beside her was so handsome too, so she also liked staring at him. Then, she said to her boyfriend, "Look at that woman. The more I look at her, the more she looks like Lin Che. Do you think she got plastic surgery to look like Lin Che? I've seen many people get plastic surgery to look like her." Her boyfriend said, Plastic surgery isn't good. What's there to operate on? Precisely. People think that she's beautiful just because she became famous, so they get plastic surgery to look like her. Plastic surgery is really amazing now. She scoffed and said, I think that she must have had plastic surgery to look like surgery. If she's not a celebrity, how can she look so good? There's no way that ordinary people can be that beautiful. I'm sure she had plastic surgery. On the other side, the three of them were done eating. The photographer took with him the necessary filming apparatus and was about to bring them out to take photographs. Just then, the other couple was about to leave for a stroll too. Seeing that the photographer was holding a tripod, they said, "Wow, are you going out to take photographs?" Chapter 610, Combating Terror with Terror, in the Guest House. Lin Che said, "Yes, we came here to take wedding photographs. So we're going out to see if we can take any shots." "Oh, I see. I heard that many people come to Greece to take wedding photos nowadays. Did you buy a package at a wedding photography gallery in the country? Are photography galleries so good nowadays? Do they even have photographers who follow you around to take photographs of your daily life?" Lin Che said, "No, we're taking it ourselves." "Ah, I know. Did you hire a photographer to follow you around and take photos of you? How much does that cost?" Lin Che said, "This I don't know either." The girl still wanted to look up and ask Gu Jingze, but when she looked at him she simply felt that although his face was handsome, it was really as cold as ice. His expression was so tight that she was afraid to speak recklessly. Her words got stuck in her throat immediately. Lin Che said, "It doesn't cost that much anyway. We're leaving first. See you at night." She pulled Gu Jingze with her and left hurriedly. The girl looked on from behind them and felt immensely envious. She said to her boyfriend beside her, "Let's take our wedding photos here too." Her boyfriend responded in disbelief, "Don't just blindly follow what other people do. They don't seem to be ordinary people either. They're actually walking around with a photographer following them. What's wrong with that? There are so many people here to take wedding photos. Who hires a photographer to follow them around to take wedding photos? The wedding photography gallery usually dispatches a vehicle to follow a few couples. The couples will take turns to take photos at the location. Once they're done, the vehicle will drive them all away. Do you think the gallery will allocate a photographer to you and make him follow you around to take photos? Do you really think that wedding photography galleries are that good for you? They have a photographer to follow them around because they hired him on their own. How much money do you think they had to spend?" Hearing this, the girl immediately became even more excited. "That's fantastic, let's hire someone to follow us around and take photos too. That's so romantic. The photos will definitely turn out better than those from the wedding photography galleries." "Forget it. Where will I get the money to hire a photographer? It's enough for you to just see it happening. Don't think so idealistically. How mean, you're such a killjoy." The photographs taken at night did not turn out as well as those taken in the day. This place looked more special in the day. After all, the sunshine and the coastline was the trademark of this area. Thus, they returned to the guest house very early. Lin Che was completely exhausted. She lay on the bed and did not move after that. Gu Jingze kept tugging at her and telling her to go and wash up. She was too lazy to go to the shared area to wash up. Gu Jingze said, "If you don't go, I'm going to carry you there, alright?" "Oh no, I'll go. I'll just go, alright." It was fine for him to do it at home, but carrying her even while they were here, that was embarrassing. Lin Che went there and washed up. After going back to the room, she continued to lie down paralyzed. Gu Jingze took a quick rinse as well, but he returned to see that Lin Che had already collapsed. She was wearing the same clothes. It was obvious that she had not showered at all. Gu Jingze asked, "Why didn't you shower?" Lin Che said gloomily, "I saw that it was a shared bathroom. There was a girl there and I was too embarrassed to remove my clothes." Gu Jingze shook his head, "You were the one who chose this guest house, right? You were the one who chose to go traveling on a budget, right?" It was true that she had chosen these things. But everything else aside, showering together, there were so many marks on her body that had not faded. They were all a result of what happened yesterday night at the hotel. He could not touch her, so he deliberately marked her body. The marks would look too suggestive if someone else saw them. Thus, she still had to come back in the end. I won't shower. I won't shower. I'll just stay like this until tomorrow. No way. You must shower. I really can't. Forget it, I'll go and get the water for you. We'll clean you up simply in the room. Lin Che looked up at Gu Jingze and blinked in agreement. Gu Jingze went out to get the water. There was a simple bathroom here but no shower, so they had to go out to wash up. On his way back to the room with the hot water, the landlord asked him what he needed the hot water for. He replied in fluent English that it was for his wife to clean her body. They would do it in the washroom and would not dirty his room. The landlord hastily said, "Oh, I heard that all Eastern men are very considerate of their wives." "You really are. That's great. Don't worry and do what you need to. It's all right." Gu Jingze smiled and brought the water in. Hearing his words, everyone outside said very enviously, "Look at how that man treats his girlfriend. He's so handsome and so considerate too." All of the men sitting in the house and chatting glanced at one another gloomily and prayed that he would not randomly come out again for a comparison. They themselves knew that this man was really not bad. Earlier, they had seen his toned figure while they were showering in the bathroom. There were also some strange scars on his upper torso that looked like bullet and knife scars. His body was so sexy that they silently resolved to exercise when they went back. As the saying went, there was no hurt without comparison. Now, he not only had a perfect figure and a beautiful face, but he even treated his girlfriend so well. Could he please leave them a way out? Lin Che cleaned herself up to the best she could. She finally felt comfortable after washing herself. It was just that she still felt gloomy while cleaning the marks on her body, especially the marks on her chest. After wiping herself down, she put on her pajamas and lay on the bed. Gu Jingze was still looking at his tablet computer over there. The room was very small, it had only a bed and a simple wardrobe, but it was very cozy and appealing. She lay there and momentarily felt a sense of warmth. It was as if she was looking at their lives many later, it was tranquil and pleasant. She said, "To be honest, budget traveling is pretty good too. Look, isn't this great? We're experiencing what it's like to live in a guest house. Furthermore, the landlord here is such a nice person too. The premises is also clean and the food we ate here was great too. The best thing is, we can't walk around and stop whenever we want back in C Nation, but we don't have to worry about being surrounded here, am I right?" Gu Jingze looked at her. "We can go out often in the future as long as you want to." "I don't want to. It won't be fun if we keep going out too." Of course, she knew that it was dangerous for him to go out and walk around all the time. Each time it happened, it was because she wanted to and so he went out to accompany her. Many people would definitely not agree with it. After all, he would be placed in a lot of danger if those bodyguards were not around. The good thing was that while they were overseas, they were not on the radar and hence, it did not seem that dangerous. Nevertheless, it was ultimately still unsafe. She looked at him and thought that he appeared even more outstanding amongst ordinary people. He was so formidable and was always exceptional in everything. No wonder he had done so well for himself and no wonder so many people treated him as their enemy. So many people would not be able to sleep restfully at night knowing the existence of such a powerful Gu Jingze. However, he had always appeared to be so ordinary in front of her. She leaned into his embrace and momentarily cherished him even more while feeling a little sad. However, at this moment, a dissonant sound suddenly penetrated the air. It was not loud, but it nevertheless sounded strange. Earlier, they had thought that everything was fine. But right now, they were suddenly a little worried. These were sounds coming from the other couple, right? Gu Jingze froze and Lin Che had an awkward expression on her face. This is also an experience. But Gu Jingze smiled and lifted her face. He gazed into her clear eyes and said, "I do have a good idea." "What idea?" "We'll combat terror with terror tilde." "What the hell?"